Thank you for initiating. Yeah, thank you for initiating this very interesting and very uncommon conversation. And we're happy to really engage the topic further with you and of course with other experienced experts on the call today. Currently, we have just about 9 of us on the call, and I don't mind us starting now because it's not a function of the number per se. The idea is to make it as spontaneous, as in process as possible, and make it useful for the author and for everyone who may eventually benefit from listening to the conversation. The good news is that we had the first spontaneous call just earlier this month, and we had just about 20 persons on the call. But within the next 4 days, we had about 130 viewers. So I'm very, very happy that it's making the sense that I'm expecting it to make. So thank you very much. I will be going off stage from now, but before I go off stage, I have the pleasure of introducing Geeton. Geeton comes in with multiple project experience from different 2 countries. I know.
Am I the only one who lost him?
Of he wins floor.
Not you alone. Even
Okay.
myself.
Okay,
Timmy,
am I back
clear
now?
Clear
Yeah,
now,
you're back
clear
now.
Yeah.
And there's have to be something about the supply chain of internet that has to be improved upon from an end. But can you hear me now? Please signal if you can hear me. Thank you. Okay, so then we have Mono Fode. He comes in with senior leadership experience from the government, and we saw from his posts some of his experience. We have him on the call today, and he will also be sharing with us. Laila Akhlagui. Laila is a GSI person. She comes with project director level of experience across multiple projects and multiple countries. And the last person that we have to here is Barry Chovitz. Barry, you have to pardon me on this. Then he comes in as the technical director for leadership, governance, and health system strengthening with Chemonic International. And he also has multiple projects and multiple country experience. Of course, you can tell from the Listserv that Barry has been very instrumental to the different conversations we've had, and a member on the Listserv has already alluded to this. So I will have the pleasure of having all these 4 to engage this topic with us today. Laila will be taking charge side by side with Barry, but we also have respected experts on the call, and we'll be listening to each other. And the essence of this is to be able to get to the heart of what Geeton is looking out for, and then with the different experience we have, we get some workable in-process best practices and share with him that will eventually be useful to other members that we can scale and become a working best practice in this field. So with that said, my name is Timi Omole, and I am just the servant that is bringing together this forum. So over to you, Laila.
Okay, thanks so much, Timmy, and thanks for everyone for joining the call. Geeton, I think, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. You probably saw from all the responses that came in that there was some confusion as to what exactly you were trying to quantify for, and you clarified blood transfer to blood bank. But I think it would be helpful to us to understand the products or services that you were trying to quantify for, and what you meant by quantify. So 2 questions, right? There, the program and the products, and then what you meant by quantify.
Okay, thank you so much, Lila, and also thank you, Tammy, for extending this topic.
Actually, I've been in the supply chain space for more than 16 years as a health logistician, but I have not really gone in this area of the blood bank issue. So it was a colleague that actually came to me to help to quantify for blood transfusion. So I started the process, but I was quite confused. So I said, oh no, I need to take it to the global to help somebody may have some idea, and we can all come together to see how we can make it work. So what I mean by quantified, I'm talking about how to project or the required need for a projected period of time. So that I was able to go through the program document, the strategy document, and also do some research. And WHO also projected saying that every 1,000 person, they expect to have 1 to 2% of blood transfusion. So based on that, then I begin to also go through an other analysis. So I said, but let me take it to the pickup platform to see how we can put our idea together, and we can come up with a better tools that will help other people be in this area who specialize in the banking area, because the supply chain in that area also I see it being very, very limited. So there's another area for us to start to look at and how can we improve on it. So that is how we are at this juncture.
So just to clarify, is it how much blood you need to service people who need blood, or is it how you get people in to give you the blood you need?
These are two different things.
Yeah.
How you get people to give blood, that is the donation. But how much blood you require to carry you over a specific period of time,
right?
That's what first I want us to look at. Then later on, we can look at how or where can we get this blood from? Because other people you say through donation, or maybe you say through the procuring from other people, but that's not what the main focus on. How much blood will be required within a projected period of time?
Barry, you're on mute.
There we go. I had to find the button fast enough. So, Geeton, I think you hit. Give a thumbs up, because one of the most interesting things about blood is they're both issues in the supply side and in the demand side. And I think what you hit upon is one of the most important questions, which is what is the demand for blood, right? And what you've said is that there is a WHO kind of number out there that says, well, I don't know, but for every 1,000 people, you need 1 or 2% of them are going to need some blood, right? And if you do that kind of calculation, that kind of assumes that that actually holds true, right? That it is possible to collect that much blood, that it is possible to deliver that much blood, and that much blood will actually be transfused, because as a supply chain person, you're going to actually go out and buy blood bags, right? One of the things you got to do is you got to collect blood, so you got to put it in a bag. So how many bags do you buy? If you go out and you buy blood based on this perception that demand is, I don't know, 1 unit of blood per every 1,000 people, that you could wind up overbuying the bag. So I just want to come back and say that you got to look. Yeah, sure.
Can I come here a bit?
Yeah, of course. It's a conversation.
Following the program, now they are saying that because it is also a person because they are using unit, and because you're saying bag, because they have 250 and they have the 450. But in their terminology, they call it unit. So now they are saying, because it is also a person, and depending on the case.
Right.
So a person may carry 1 or 2 units, and also we should also look at the age within
exactly.
that. But what really I want us to look at is not how it is stored or how it is acquired, but how can we project or require need for a specific period of time.
Right. So I think, right, that's why I wanted to switch over then to say something a little bit about the supply side of things, right? So in theory, you've got a number that represents the demand, and you're right. one of the more complicated things about blood is that blood's got at least 3 parts to it. There's the whole blood, there's platelets, and there's plasma. And one could imagine that when one says 1 unit, it's like 1 unit of what? Do you mean 1 unit of whole blood? Do you mean 1 unit of plasma? Do you need 1 unit of platelets? And each of those has, but before I go too far into that, let's just talk about the supply of blood. It isn't as if you can just go out and source that internationally. Nobody's making blood, right? So blood literally has to come from people. And the supply, therefore, is whatever the demand is, 1% of one unit per every 1,000 people. Your supply is very constrained because it requires people pretty much within Liberia, in your country, to be willing to give blood, right? You can't buy it from India and you can't go buy it from China. It's like there aren't factories making blood, right? And there's also, in the supply side, you've also got the question of testing for quality assurance. You've got cold storage conditions is also a major factor in how you're going to store the blood. So in a lot of ways, when you look at the demand and the supply for blood, I would say that your supply is going to be a much bigger constraint than the demand, meaning that there's always more demand for blood than you can possibly supply. So when somebody says, yeah, I don't know, let's say per 1,000 people, 1% of them are going to need 1 unit of whole blood collected, and however that gets divided up is not, don't worry about that part. I think that demand for blood is always going to be way higher than the supply. So then I think when you want to do a forecast or a demand-based forecast, what you really have to do is you have to consider what your supply of blood is. And in this case, you know, I'm kind of a very old school guy. I want to go right back to the basics. So one of the resources I dropped in is there's actually a nice new version of this JSI Quantification of Health Commodities book, right? Which I dropped into the chat. I also dropped in links to the old one because I helped work on that one way back in the day. So the first version of that was in 2000. But essentially, you know, one of the things that says, and also there's a great video that JSI put out on the JSI forecasting video, which is that second one, says real clearly, it says, you know, pretty much when you're doing forecasting, what happened in the past is very likely to influence, like what happened in the past is very likely to be very well correlated with the future. So I would say if you're going to do Kweko, I think you're if you could go on mute, please, that would be helpful. If I was just going to go back to that old school thinking though, Geeton, about you know, how do you figure it out? I would say the number of blood bags you bought and used last year, that historical data about how many blood bags were actually used or how many units were actually transfused, is probably your best indication for what the future will look like. So these ideas of like demographic forecasts or other sorts of forecasts, like this 1 in 1,000, is like going to be a very upper limit, because that's not the thing that's going to stop you. The thing that's going to stop you is the number of people who are willing to give blood. Mm-hmm. And so also then all of your resources to test the blood and to keep it at temperature. So I think your main source, your main type of forecasting would be a historical based forecast based on the number of units transfused, or the number of blood bags you previously purchased, or the number of blood bags that was issued from the lowest level of the supply chain that you can get. But that I think is going to be a much stronger indicator than doing something around how much blood could have been used had blood been available, because the supply chain is not the only constraint there. And I'll stop there because I know I've said a couple mouthfuls there.
Geeton, do you have any data in the system currently? Is there anything about how many bags were used or distributed, or is there a record of how many transfusions were performed? I think that's probably least likely, but
there's no data at all. Yeah. So then what I started requesting was I asked the program if we will use the mobility indicator to collect some data from 2 or 3 DKS hospitals within Liberia, and also requested that we should also look at
Can we have everyone who is on the call please go on mute? Joaquin, I think if it's possible, we're getting some background noise that's making it difficult to hear. Geeton.
Yeah. Okay, so what I did was to request program to come up with at least for each of the disease condition. If, for example, if you are treating someone with anemia, what would be the maximum blood that you would require? If you are also looking at a surgery case, what would be the maximum you should be able to look at? Then we can start from there, and we go through the projections that WHO also provided, and see how we can get some information from there. Then we can use 2 or 3 of the biggest hospitals, like we can use JFK, we can use Redemption, we collect some data from that, then we can use that as a basis to continue from there. That's
so
what
that is one of the methods that's used in forecasting. So using you know, the demographics and then looking at the rates. What happens there, and I agree with Barry, I think looking at past patterns is a better prediction, but it sounds like you don't have any. But just in general, what happens when you start looking at demographics and morbidity data is that you're having to make those many different assumptions along the way, right? How many of those people is the 1 to 2% correct? How much, Barry put in the comments, how much is wasted? How much of that blood is at the place and time of the service that is required? How much of it didn't, you know, you have so, and with each of those assumptions and each of those calculations, you probably don't have perfect data. So you're introducing an error every time you have an assumption. But I'm very curious to see, we have UsmanMunu, who's worked in National Birth Services before in a neighboring country in Sierra Leone. And I'm wondering what, if you can tell us a little bit about your experiences and if you have anything to add to some of this conversation that we've been discussing. Usman, if you could go off mute and just share your experiences.
Yeah, I think I just want to give a few comments on what have been said earlier. Really, the blood services, I think probably most African regions is not fully established. So my experience at the National Safe Blood Service in country here, when I was posted at the directorate, there are virtually no system in place talking about quantification, doing a focusing, or let me say in general, the process involving PSM. So what I did first is that to have a general meeting with partners and then also try to review existing documents, focusing especially on the quantification, forecasting, and all sort of things. Since we have a national body that is responsible for procurement, distribution, and then storage as other key steps in the PSSCM package, that is the National Medical Supplies Agency. So our task at the directorate is for forecasting and then also quantification. So since there were no existing data, it was somehow difficult in the first year to do quantification. However, reading existing documents that are available, so using the demographic data wise and then also probably consumption pattern. So the consumption pattern was X. So we look at as I think one of the presenters already said, discussed earlier, looking at your demographic data and then the percentage of people that's normally should be bled, whether voluntarily or any other. So looking at it, the percentage per population. So with that, I was able to develop a tool and then get that one. I think I use approximately around between 5 to 10% of the population, and get up a figure and then start monitoring the process. However, the directorate again also did not have specific commodities that will be required to specifically design for the blood services. So using again existing data around that is being used around the globe, try to see how best we could have ours. So looking at blood bags, transfusion sets, the anti-serals and other specific commodities. This was done in tandem with the various blood bank leads within the country. So we are able to develop that one and then has an essential tool for that, saying that these are the commodities that are specific to the blood services. And then also with the program managers, we're able to do that. However, I triggered the issue of having a national essential diagnostic list, which is ongoing, just like we have the national essential medicine list. So we are currently on it, just on the final stage for approval, and then later on the CMO minister can sign that one, and it becomes a document that the country will depend on. So whenever partners are coming in, they also follow that trend. So we are able to get that, and then we did our first quantification, although we missed out a lot because there was a time where we have an issue of a stock out, because the target there, the projected target there, we don't get it properly because there were no data available at all. So coming in, started having consumption data reports, returns every month from the various blood banks that we have in country, both regional and then also the hospitals. Although there are challenges in that one as well. And when those data come in, we try to analyze it. And then we see there is a gap, probably because of poor turnout. And then sometimes these laboratory leads, they do not report the actual data, what they are using. There are a lot of mismatch, more especially when it comes to the anti-serals. It's very, very much difficult to have an accurate reporting data on that. And then also sometimes fail to capture what they are doing out on the field whenever there are outreach blood donation drive, when they go to the field. So they fail to capture that one again as well. It brings some of these challenges. So we give that again to the system using the demographic data, and then also using assumption, increasing that one from 6%, I think, to 15% of the population. Depending, saying that using WHO standard, so for every 1,000 population, you have a certain amount of percentage of people that you should be bled. So these are some of the things we are using in country, and actually it has been working out. There is a progress, at least. Issue of stockouts now is a thing of the past, although sometimes it's do flagged up with most of the essential commodities, especially the anti-serals. And then also, when I came in at the directorate, we have blood bags from various range for the 450, 300, 250, and 150 mils. So with what they are reporting or getting from the field, we see that the 300 mils and that of the 150 mils are not being utilized that much. And we have a lot of expiries. It was somewhat difficult again, a huge economic loss to the country as a whole. So we sat together with UNICEF and then see how best we can at least have two specific specification of those blood bags to be used in country and then be part of the essential list for the blood servicing. So we decided with the 450 ml blood bag and that of the 250 ml blood bag. There are rationale behind that. So we have a lot of reasons why whatsoever, although it was a back and forth thing. And then until then we come into a conclusion. I saw somebody's hand up. I don't know.
Yeah,
if you want to ask question.
Yeah, I have many questions. You've raised a lot of really great issues. One of them is there any way to take a unit of blood, depending on the amount of volume that's in there, and spin it to only get the platelets, or spin it to only get, so that you're not completely at waste of those products after the fact? So that's one question. The second question is, I know that in hospitals and other areas, when there is an emergency or a trauma event and there aren't enough blood to be used for transfusion, the health workers in a facility, the ones who have like the universal blood type, or a family member who might be a candidate for donation, may donate the blood at the moment, if there is such a need. And how do you account for that in the availability of your supply?
Well, to having the various segments of the blood instead of having the whole blood, we have specific regions within the country that do process these blood components. There are 3 of them at the moment, 2 fully functional. We call them the regional blood bank. Within the Western area, we have the PCMH, and then within the provinces, we have the McKinney, and then also the Bo Regional Bank. So these are the main facilities that do process blood components. So however, whenever they have a whole blood, they will segregate this one into various components, and then whenever facilities within the country needed blood components, they have to do transfer directly from the regional blood banks that are processing various blood components. And then when it comes to an emergency situation wherein an individual do need transfusion, and at that moment, we do have, let's say, probably the lab lead there not around, but let's say a technician working at the blood bank there is around, and we need to bleed the patient for, we need to bleed the individual so that patient can have the required blood product that he needs. So we have always emergency stocks that are available within the facilities, and then a designated individual is responsible to that for account for what is being removed from the emergency store to be utilized. So once that one is made, there is a form wherein they can record that one. Before now, it was in existence. It was not in existence. So we devised that one. So we monitor that, and then they will alert us. So once in a while, at the end of every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we'll do a visit to see, and then to see actually if they are doing this, whether the proper documentation is being done or what have you, and then also to try to replenish the commodities that are being used. So that's what's normally we do. Although there are challenges as well, again, within our region, because we don't normally get it 100%, because sometimes they'll say, this one escaped my mind to record it, but I could remember I use this, sometimes, and then it involves a lot of challenges, but with time, I know we'll be there 100%, because for now, we're just managing situations to see how best we could be at the right footing, because before now, everybody is just doing whatever they are doing. So we have a lot of products in store where they are not utilizing it. They are there. Nobody's aware that these products are there. They should be utilized. A lot of expiries and what have you. And then also low consumption pattern or data being available, so that one can, which is very, very much key in our quantification, and then focusing on quantification exercises, and then also try to place the actual orders so that we cannot run out of stock and all the sort. I think these are some of the way we are operating in country. But the truth of the fact is, to start a program where there are no available data, coordination is not there, it's very much difficult. It's just take the grace of God, and then also perseverance, and then somebody that talk or bring out presentation based on existing data. You must try to convince people, see how best they can see reasons, reference a lot of existing documents around. Say this is the standard. This is the standard. This is what will be done. This is what will be done. It's really difficult, really. But with the help of God, and then also supporting partners, and then also my program manager, the support from the directorate members, we have been able to achieve a lot of things within the blood services. And now things are ongoing. Although still we do cry sometimes with issues with stockouts or what have you. And that's one is as a result of funding available for procurement, and then also sometimes the partners that are supporting the blood services. Yes, they are coming in, but keep on supporting same activity another partner is supporting. So that's one I've identified that one, and then we have started discussion to see how best we could have an MOU, and then giving them our work plan, so a list of activities. So if a partner A is supporting an activity A, partner B cannot support the same activity. So at least we can have these equal distributions of fund, and then also try to prevent some of these hurdles that are coming in, that are popping in within the process or within the program. So we are there gradually.
Thank you, Usman. Barry, I saw you come off mute for a while. Did you want to review the comments?
Yeah, I just there's so much richness in the discussion here. I keep thinking mostly about the concern about over forecasting, right? It would be very easy to do a quantification. It's pretty easy to do a quantification that's, well, I don't know, send me millions and millions of blood bags and things. And when we add up all of the resources that go into first you collect the blood, which means having clinicians who are available to do the draws, check in the people, check for check their hemoglobin for anemia, and then the time spent collecting blood, and then you've got all the tests that happen post blood. I think somebody actually dropped into the original chain there, the number of tests that are done with syphilis and HIV were the ones that I mostly remember. But when you think about all the resources that might be used, it's pretty considerable. And so I think that a quantification that is a little stronger and has a little bit more sort of like understanding of the constraints around collecting blood is, and use that to compare to that demographic forecast or to that kind of ideal, if we could collect as much blood as we needed, I think that will produce a stronger result, and one that people can believe in a little bit better. I think the most important thing I heard Usman mention were, there's only a certain number of places that can even process and store and hold blood, which I think is a great place. Like I would literally and I think Geeton, you mentioned, you were very clear. You've got I think you said the hospital's JFK. I've heard of. I think you said the other one might have been called Redemption. I mean, clearly, if those are places that have the ability to process blood, they probably, although not for sure, have some sense of how much blood they tested for syphilis and HIV. A proxy number would be, well, if we tested 1,000 units for probably only collected 1,000 units of blood, potentially out of those you only actually transfused, say, 600. Because maybe a few were HIV positive, maybe a few were syphilis positive, maybe a few were damaged or spilled, maybe a few expired in the fridge, so before they could be used. So a proxy measure like the number of HIV tests performed by the blood services might be one good way to understand if there is a 1-to-1 ratio. For every 1 unit collected, we perform 1 HIV test. Might be a good way to start. And I would, again, kind of urge you to kind of start with where you are more than where you wished you were, right? It's easy to commit resources to where you wished you could be, but I would say start with where you are. If they only processed 10,000 units, but you wished you had 100,000 units, then what you need to do is increase the supply by increasing the citizens' willingness to give blood more than just by buying a bunch of more blood bags. The number of bags available doesn't actually, right? Just because the bags are available doesn't mean they will be filled with blood,
and
right?
In addition, not just increase the supply, but the efficiency of the system, so
right.
that you're not losing products as it's being distributed. You're distributing appropriately to the right sites where the demand actually is. So matching that at the lower levels, and that you're holding them appropriately for the, the cold chain all the different constraints that we've talked about that take away from both the supply and the demand. Now I've forgotten my question. All of these things that we've talked about, Geeton and Usman and Barry, is why it's really difficult for us to say, here is an Excel spreadsheet for you to use, right? Because depending on the situation you're in, depending on the level of the data you have, what kind of data you have, what is the quality of that information? Do you have test kits for testing the blood quality? Is that the data that you're using? Are you only using the demographics information? And then from the demographics, what kind of assumptions you're applying? Each of these would be a different calculation and a different cell and a different percentage or a proportion. So that's why the comments that I believe you received from IAPHL were all about understanding the context, understanding the situation, what kind of information you had, what kind of products you're trying to forecast for, because all of those things then become different cells and variables within the calculation that you would need, that you would put into an Excel sheet or a calculator to apply. Usman, your hand is raised?
Yes. Just in addition to what you said earlier, and then also with the issue of for TTIs. So our standard here, whether it's a regional blood bank or hospital blood bank, whenever you collect blood, you test for all TTIs, and then these commodities are always available. The screening kits, HIVs, syphilis, hepatitis, both B and then that of C, and then others. So that is the standard. You just screen. And then as the previous presenter said earlier, you might want to collect 1,000 units of blood. By the end of the day, after doing a proper screening, you cannot utilize those 1,000 units all. You must have those that are positive for either of the TTIs, and then also those that meet the standards, and then negative for the TTIs, and it can store that. Some get expired in the process, some wastage, and all sort of things. So as I said on the email trail, it's very more difficult to have a standard Excel sheets for doing the quantification based on what you are using, whether demographic or use the consumption pattern or consumption data that is available. For our own setting, since the consumption data was not really available, because I tried that one initially, so, okay, can we have consumption data? So I asked for like 3 months to see the pattern, what they are reporting to me, and then what is really happening on the ground. It's two different things. So we cannot use this. If we use this, trying to place in orders, the orders might come in probably within a month or two. Everything got finished for a whole year. So we start again. So these are some of the challenges. So what we did is that for us to have our own Excel sheet, we look at what is already in existence for the free healthcare commodities. And then most of the time, the free healthcare commodities, they are both using consumption pattern and that of the demographic. So try to study the two and then try to adapt it to our own system and see how best we can have a uniform one. Actually, it's helpful, but sometimes within every quarter or 6 monthly, we do review it and then see. If we're seeing what has already coming in, the consumption data that is been coming in, we look at it, say, is it possible so that following year, we can utilize the consumption pattern or data so that we can have a forecasting and quantification, and then also in parallel with that of the demographic data. So these are the things, we are doing. It's always evolving. Sometimes you stick to one pattern of quantification, but with data coming in, you tend not to go with that again. So, okay, now let me do a mixed match. And then you see, you compare the two, and then we agreed as a program. And that process, when doing it, involves all key partners, key players within the Ministry of Health. And then also we involved the laboratory leads, the various laboratory, because they are the one utilizing this thing. They are the one using the commodities that we are procuring or that we are quantifying for. So wherever there are issues, we try to address the issues, give a lot of justifications, reasons why, and then we come to agreement, and then we can go ahead with the other stages for the PSCM. And that's what I just want to add,
Thank you, Usman. I completely could not agree further with having a mixed group to review the forecast assumptions with from the demand side and from the supply side to ensure that you understand the context, because you're always going to learn something that you may not have been aware of, that you didn't even know that you didn't know. So, Barry, you have a question about understanding a little bit more about how blood is collected?
Yeah, it isn't as if, it isn't as if you walk into a clinic and go, hey, I'd like to give a unit of blood today, right? And they go, yeah, hey, have a seat. We'll hook you up, right? Like, I think that
I used to do that in college, though. I used to donate plasma for $30.
Well, in fact, I was out. I was out shopping in a shopping center in Namibia, and they were collecting blood when I was living there. And I just said, yeah, for some juice and cookies, I'll give blood, right? And but I did wonder, like, I think blood collection can be like event based, meaning the blood services literally says we're gonna have 100 events in these 10 locations, 10 times a year, we're going to collect blood. It'll be this. So then potentially that and the number of nurses could be used, as I think I dropped into the original email chain, that could be a driving factor. If blood is collected kind of on the spot in an emergency situation, where, do you have a count of those facilities that do that? Do you know where they're located? Do you know how often or frequently that happens? Those things may also, then drive where you're going to try to find the data or the proxy data that will help you, to figure out how to do this forecast. It's definitely a tough one. And like I said in the chat earlier too, I think a lot of blood probably does get wasted due to expiration or your inability to take whole blood, spin it down, grab the plasma, throw the plasma in the deep freezer and leave it there for a year. And then even at the end of the year, if you haven't used it, then it has to go as well. So getting some sense for that as well would be interesting. But how's blood collected?
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, darn it, I've got to run.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks so much. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Cheers. I'll look for the video.
Geeton, do you want to respond to anything you've heard so far? You're on too. If not, that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. I think I got a lot of valid points, particularly on Barry talking about the condition. But one question I really want to ask, if we have any material or any document to say if someone work in the hospital and they were diagnosed of malaria, and at the end they would need some blood transfusion, what would be the required blood? I mean, like the maximum blood that we could be able to look at. We have any document as such?
Well, if I could say something on that, each country do have a standard treatment guidelines. I don't know if really that one is available from your side. Saying for a particular patient, I've been diagnosed of malaria, and then probably the HBDI is not normal within range, and then the individual might need a transfusion. So based on that document, it might indicate, so this one needs 2 units of blood, 1 unit of blood. I'm just saying. So, and then that's one again also based on the facility setting, they have a management team that do a clinical team that do decides on that. They bring up based on evidence or existing data, and they can say this is what we'll go by. So whenever an individual has been diagnosed of malaria, based on HB weight level and all the rest, It needs this in case there is a need for transfusion. So they will adopt that one within their setting. So that is what normally they will use in tandem with the national treatment guidelines, the STG. And then also that is what they will do within that setting. It's based on a certain thing. So your assignment or your task is try to go for, let's say, your standard treatment guidance within your country, and then also probably discuss with most of, let's say, the tertiary hospitals or the regional hospitals to see how best if they adopt this standard treatment guidelines, and then focusing on those with, let's say, dermatological disorders. You will see whether there is a need for this and this, and they will tell you clearly. Yeah. Or also using some references around materials, WHO treatment guidelines, standard treatment guidelines, I think MSF and all sort of things. I think those ones might be helpful. If not, they are not available. If you are working at the program, you can trigger that one. Say, we want this, and this. You trigger it up, try to discuss with a lot of partners, but that one might start with a brief discussion within your directorate and see how best you can cascade it out. You have a roadmap. They'll tell you that, okay, if we want to do this, we'll work with this particular institution, and this institution will need collaboration from this. So you start the discussion there, and then finally you have a roundtable discussion, and then you propose a roadmap on how you can go about it. Right? All the necessary key players around, the clinicians, not around the specialists, you name them. Because I remember during my first year of working within the hospital setting, I was opportune to be part of reviewing our treatment guidelines in CLU, standard treatment guidelines. So we are being divided into subgroups, and I was opportune to be part of dermatological disorders, and then also few of the pediatric disorders. So I learned a lot from our Professor Gayflor within the dermatological disorders. So, and then there are other clinicians that are involved around, So these are the documents you go through. You see them, they will tell you outrightly, see, you need this amount of units of blood for this particular patient that needs transfusion. So you will see that one. But to say, if you want to adapt global standard, yes, it's fine. That's the standard. But is that one applicable within your setting? Because most of these documents that are available online, with special reference in WHO, CDC, I think, probably MSF, they're looking at the global standard.
Yeah.
But within your setting, you try to look within those documents and then try to adapt it if that's the real thing. Yes, I think that's what I could say. If there are any other concerns, you can raise it up.
Yeah, it looks like there should be national guidelines, Geeton, and if there aren't, then look to surrounding countries, because they're likely to have similarities in malaria transmission and demographics in terms of childhood rates of severe anemia, and what their national recommendations are. And WHO, again, like you said, Usman, they have them. We're reaching about 10 minutes. I'm wondering if anybody else has anything to add who's on the call, any questions you feel we've missed. And I have one other maybe comment to throw out while you're thinking about your questions or comments is, Usman, have you noticed any seasonality? I guess malaria would have seasonality, so increases during malaria season for blood transfusion, or sometimes trauma or accidents happen on a monthly, full moon cycles, they say in the ER sometimes. Is there any need to account for seasonality for blood demand?
Well, our setting, let me say, we have, how can I put it up? Say for malaria, it's endemic in our setting. And then also RTs on the increase. So, however, the reporting of these or the needs for blood transfusion, depending on the number of cases each of the facilities are seeing. And sometimes when they are sending in a monthly returns, I can notice that one. You will notice that a particular month will come, you see utilization of these blood commodities, the blood bags, and all other accessories on the lower demand as compared to the previous. So if I could do an assessment on it to try to compare, ask relevant questions with the various lab leads, they will tell you that this particular period, let's say week 1 to week 2 of this month, we see a lot of cases which that demands blood for RTs, for instance. Sometimes malaria, for instance. They will tell you that. And then also, if we could decide to do like a supervision within the facility, looking at their patient registers and all the rest, you will really see that. So that is how normally we do account for that and capture it. But it depends on the facility and the number of cases that are seen.
Okay, great, thank you. So does anyone have a question they'd like to pose or additional information to share to help Geeton? Geeton, do you have any other questions as you're thinking about how to proceed?
No, I think I got everything. So what I will do when I develop tools on my Excel tools, then I will share also with the people that can give me some other input so I can proceed to the next level. But I think I'm very, very grateful to everyone for the contribution. I really appreciate it, and I think I can start from somewhere now with confidence based on the background that you has given me. We also take the approach of going to collect the data from the hospital. But I will first drop the tools and share with the team, and they can be able to give some other advice from them.
Great. Hopefully,
so one more last thing before I leave. You might, I don't know, you might get resistance really. So it's advisable you work with your directorate and then probably with your heads of office. You cascade that one down either via email or official letter saying starting this period, let's say second week September, a team of individual might be coming around to assess and then get information that will help us in our forecasting and our quantification exercises. Once you get that one, and then you can adapt any existing tool. You can adapt any existing tool within the program. As I said on the email, like try to get all the required commodities that you need for the blood services. That is specific first. And then you can classify that one based on essential, non-essential, as you like. Yeah, but that one should be together with the various lab leads, clinicians, and all sort of individuals that you know or think that they are relevant to that, so that you can have that list and then you start working on them. So if there are no existing data on consumption, you try to test first. Say, okay, let me have for this month, let me try to see how best you can give me consumption data, returns, and then you will see. Once you get that one, you can go to the field and try to observe whether what they are reporting is what is actually happening on ground. If not, then automatically you cannot utilize that data for any quantification or forecasting. Then you can base your quantification based on your demographic data and then try to improve.
And to lead the process, but the activity will actually be done by.
Oh, you got on mute. You accidentally pressed mute.
Yeah, you are lost somewhere.
Okay, yeah, what I was saying, the data or the entire activity will actually be done by the ministry through the program themselves. So I will be there to guide the process. So whatever data they're going to collect, it will be done by the ministry, and the facility they are going to collect the data is also being run by the ministry. So that aspect will be very, very easier because it is the ministry themselves and involved into this.
Excellent point. Excellent point. To always keep the ministry center.
Yeah.
Just to summarize, and thank you everyone, Geeton, we're so happy, Timmy, for suggesting this spontaneous conversation. I'm so glad we were able to do it. I know that I learned a lot. And we really appreciate, Usman, your time as an expert working in the field for helping us with this. Geeton, it sounds like there, even within demographics that you were going to start out doing, there are different ways of approaching the demographics. There's the 1 to 2% or the 5 to 2%, but then you also have certain disease states that might require more transfusion, like looking at, doing the 1 to 2% as one method, right? And then using malaria or trauma or something like that as another base group for who would need blood transfusions at what rate and how much. Looking at the proxy consumption, looking at how many tests of the quality of the blood were done at the various centers, looking at the centers that do different kinds of blood, who do the most blood donations, for example, and then trying to calculate using each of all of these different methods, reviewing the assumptions with the key players who understand those systems, trying to get as accurate as you can with each method, and then sitting with them and reviewing the outcomes of all of those and seeing which one of those seems to be most appropriate. And as Usman mentioned, he did start collecting or putting in place procedures to collect better information to help him do future forecasts better, right? So looking at where your opportunities are or where information is easiest to collect from or has the highest amount of demand or need or consumption that could be collected to extrapolate for a total need. You may not be able to collect it in all the places that use the product, but if there is a tertiary hospital that uses it most commonly, or if there's a malaria program that uses the most blood, if there is a quality control or a transfusion that's doing the most of the donations, looking to see what kind of data you can collect from them so that next time you do this process, it'll be easier to do for you. I think those are the majority of the conclusions that I was able to get. I would suggest going through all of the comments and the transcript and taking down each of those variables that influence the amount of demand and supply, what kind of information you can collect to apply it to your forecast.
All right, clarification. I think Laila, right? Did I pronounce the name right? Laila. Okay. Actually, I'm not a specialist within the ministry. I'm a pharmacist, although I'm trying to specialize on the supply chain. But getting scholarships, it's somehow difficult. And then I did apply for this Empower thing, but it's somehow costly. But probably we are on negotiation to see how best there will be a reduction in that amount whatsoever, so that I can take my my niche on that path. But it's just based on what I've been doing on the field and then getting involved in most of these things, activities, initiating activities to see for the betterment of the country as a whole. Yeah. Because I'm just a pharmacist with 5 years standing post-graduation.
You seem to be doing just fine to me. So, and I'm just a pharmacist as well. So.
Okay, all right.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Looking forward, Timmy, to the next one. This was really, really enjoyable. I hope everyone had a great time on the call as well and learned as much as we did.
So can
Thank
you
you.
share your email with me? I'm writing my email on the chat box so that we can keep in touch. Probably if I have issues around, I might raise it up with you. Is that permitted?
Thank you. I'm sure that can be handled.
Okay.
Yes. So I want to say thank you for heart. Thank you, Usman, and thanks to Barry. Barry had to go because he is currently attending to another call currently. And then, of course, ultimately, want to say thank you to Geeton for initiating the whole process. And of course, he's capping it up again by saying that he will share whatever tool he's eventually developed. So we are looking forward to that. And this recording will also be shared. I encourage all of us to share with our colleagues and let them listen and then share whatever thoughts they have with us. Thank you again. This is 2 minutes past the hour, and I want to say thank you for lending us your time to discuss. Thank you for being on the call.
Thank you. Good luck, Geeton.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Although you took at least 30 minutes of my time, I'm doing an inventory. But it's okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure meeting you all around.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.